What are the challenges that come with trying to legislate for new technology like the rise of AI? Well, that's what we're going to be exploring this week on the Data Radio Show. Hello there and welcome to this week's episode. I find myself with a little bit of a conundrum. I've been invited to our Parliament here in New Zealand to talk about artificial intelligence and looking at legislation changes that might come in the future around the new technology. And I thought to myself, I'm probably not the best person to talk about this, but I know someone who is. James Hartwright, who's the Chief Executive of Pragmaticians in Australia, has worked with government agencies before to change how they deal with data and how they interact with information. And I thought he'd be a great person to chat to about what legislators need to know about legislating for changing technology and what people who work in that field need to know about the way that these changes can impact them. So we had a great little chat around how this is all going to work and some of the factors that need to be taken on board for legislators to consider what's happening. Now, before we jump into this particular episode, which I had a lot of fun making, just make sure that you have signed up to get emails from us in our Data Pro newsletter, which is all linked down below, and subscribe to the channel or like the video or share the video. Also, if you are in Australia at the moment, we have an event coming up on April 3rd, 2025, where we've got the team from Scale Free in Melbourne for one afternoon to sit down and have a chat about, well, a whole bunch of stuff really. And there'll be information about that linked in the description down below as well, so that you can check everything out. It's all on our school page as well if you want to head over to our classrooms there and have a little bit of fun meeting other people within the industry. Right, let's jump over to this chat that I had with James a little bit earlier on in the week. Hey, welcome to the episode, James. How are you going?
I'm good, thank you. Another warm, sunny day in Sydney.
That's not a bad thing. James, head of Pragmaticians, you've done a lot of work with government, with education. I thought it'd be really cool to sit down and have a chat to you today about legislation when it comes to data and AI. I have been invited to a conference in our Parliament next week to sit down and talk about changing faces of legislation around artificial intelligence in particular. I'm really keen to get your insights into what that could actually mean, how that could look, and some of the things that legislation might need to cover or the mistakes that they might need to avoid. Because it's a bit of a minefield out there. It's evolving pretty quickly at the moment.
Yeah, every day.
Every day. So the first question I've got for you then is, how can legislation remain relevant in the face of rapidly evolving data technologies and practices? It's a small one to start off with.
Yeah, just a small one to start with. Look, there's probably three parts in there. So that probably the first one is, why laws get created. So why do laws come up? And it's usually when there's been enough bad actors, enough people who know what might happen with new things coming through and want to put that through. An example would be here in Australia, the children's online code. So that's going through at the moment, but they have said, we need to, quite rightly, we need to protect children in their online engagement. And so that's that first bit, is just going, well, when we've got new things like generative AI and all of the things that it can do, we are in some ways rightly concerned by what could go wrong with it. And so coming in with a level of legislation is appropriate. There's another space in there, though, in the self-regulation. And there was New Zealand, the Christchurch, after the
Christchurch massacre.
Yep. Yes, thank you. Yep. So NetSafe came in and said, okay, we need a set of regulation in there, and we're going to put the regulation through. But what we're going to do is, with an agreement with industry, that we will work through a code of practice, and we're going to build best practices and standards that pretty much everybody agrees to on paper. And there's hopefully the set of people that go, I know why this is being done. I know the department might put restrictions on me, but better that than even higher enforcement of restrictions and curtailing everything I can do. So that's sort of where I am in if we're bringing in legislation under generative AI on those things. We've got we need to look at that thing of stages and making it appropriate. Um, and giving industry a certain level of elbow room to be able to still do what they do, unless they come in as bad actors, unless they just go, they sort of gamify the system and try through, and then quite rightly somebody should come in there. So that's probably my bit there. The third part though is, as you said, things are moving so quickly. I saw a thing early this morning, which was, there's now somebody open sourced a voice AI that sounds human, which is an underlying LLM. So now, effectively for free with a bit of time, I could emulate your voice to almost perfection, which is horribly scary
Yeah,
and
no.
horribly exciting, because then I could do this podcast just with me and pretend you're responding to it. So the pros and cons. And like that third bit there is, there's as we know, like everywhere in law, English is an imperfect language. And so getting that wording right, and appropriate, and the letter of the law, and then the appropriate interpretation of the law. For example, sensitive data. So when I hear the word sensitive data in my privacy legislation, I know what that means. So
Mhm.
sensitive data is your biometrics, tracking the phone signal. That's sensitive data because it really is deep and dirty. But I've got clients who've gone, well, passport number, that's sensitive data. I don't want my passport number to get out there. My tax file number, I don't want that to get out there. That's only deemed personal data, according
Mhm.
to the vast majority of Privacy Acts. So we've got to work also with this imprecision of the English language, and but still work that through. Here are the words. This was the general intent, to allow people to appropriately act off the back of those laws.
So, can legal definitions of data categories, like sensitive data, personal data, anonymized data, can it keep pace with the technical realities?
I don't think it can. The best example I've got there is, I've been working with one of my government clients, rebuilding their privacy policy in around cookies, and to cover everything that they need to cover. This privacy policy got to 20 pages long, and I went, I'm having difficulty reading that, and it's my job, and you're paying me to review it. Any normal person, any simple human coming in is just going to go, nah. I mean, it's
Mhm.
either decline everything or accept everything. So I actually used generative AI. I said, take this 20-page piece and create the TLDR, the too long didn't read part of this, and say, here it is. Here's one page, as clear as we can get it. The full details of the other 20 pages are there. So if you really, really want to go into the detail, there is some legalese, fully coverage things, but here is something that you can get a sense of what that is. And I think that's the sort of thing in any sort of legal definition, any of those things that we can do where we try and make it usable to a simple human, usable for somebody where English is a second language, all of that sort of stuff, that we can actually start using some of these things. And it should be a default, a standard. This is the clear, plain text version of what this 100 or 200 or 300 page legal document is.
Does that then change how we define what informed consent is, especially when you look at how data can be transformed or repurposed after collection?
Yeah. I've been in my spare time. I've been scanning a number of websites in the cookies that get dropped, and the it's you go, okay, so people are dropping cookies and they're looking at it to personalize my engagement. They're looking at it to get analytics on the journeys that generally people take. They're looking at it for performance, and they're looking at it for marketing. Informed consent in under GDPR and a number of other things is across those four. But I did the general sort of scans I'm doing across commercial and government. There are about 600 cookies getting dropped. 600, 400, 600, 700, B2B, B2C. And you're going, informed consent on 400 cookies is, is
A
well,
lot.
I've now got to list every vendor right now. I've got to work out what each of those vendors are doing. And so we again, we really have to simplify this. And I was on a LinkedIn conversation around not-for-profits. So not-for-profits who are appropriately building websites and building websites probably in some areas of disadvantaged people, in and definitely in sensitive areas, domestic violence, etc., and things like that. And the cookies that they're dropping with Google, Vimeo, etc., those are third-party cookies that have a building an overall profile of those. It's like that for me is way into the sensitive arena that we need to help those people who are building and looking after websites, as well as the end user people, so that the informed consent and the I know what I'm going to do with your data and I'm going to look after it in the way that it needs to be based on that sensitivity. And so I think both have to come up.
So cookies, for example, are great as a sort of a historical piece of data because it shows you, the sites that you've been to, and a lot of people don't realize they can clear out the cache, they can get rid of them, that they're sitting there for ages. How should legislation address differences between different types of data sets like static or live data sets or historical data sets like those older cookies in terms of accountabilities and rights?
Yeah. I mean, you said informed consent, and so the EU with the GDPR that the UK copied and a number of other countries and regions have copied. They went in and they've added more and they've added more, and the EU have about 6 months ago went, no, this is stupid. We're getting too far down you need to know the technology, so that and the other parts of blocking third-party cookies, most of the browsers can do it. So there needs to be a reframing, and it is coming through. But it's the piece in finding like 4 or 5 terms that we can do. So this is my personal data. This is my behavioral data, and this is just behavior that I'm doing for general profiling or something in around there that people understand what that's actually doing and have the informed part to do that, and then making everybody behind that, making that tech simple enough to hook in and conform to it. Because that's the next thing is like you put in your thing, you put in your consent management platform that stops all of the cookies, but you've got to make sure that everybody's respecting that and hoik them out if they don't. And it's like there's a lot of technology still to do that to make all those interconnection pieces. Yeah.
Is there a way that legislation then can protect against function creep? I agree that my data could be used for this, but they have updated their systems, and so now they use that data for something slightly different.
Yeah, look, in truth, that's already written in law. I mean, that's already in the if you give me a business your personal data, that I have to explain what business purposes I'm going to use it for, and I cannot so for Australia, New Zealand, I can't share that unless you give me explicit consent to share that with a third party. So there's law and self-regulation under IAB that people are doing that, but I've been in a few of those where we've collected the data and we go, wouldn't that be an amazing marketing campaign if we use that data? And you get carried away by thinking, hey, there's these people coming in, they've already bought or engaged with my products. I believe in myself that me selling them, upselling them, cross-selling them, this is a good thing. But if I'm using data that I've captured, a date of birth or occupation or something like that, hey, I'm going to do a special T-shirt that has their occupation on it. That's not an appropriate use. In the marketing arena, you still have to be careful in things like financial services, in doing scoring algorithms, etc. That's a lot more appropriately defined in what you can and can't do, and lots of tech and process and governance to make sure that cannot be exposed to anybody apart from the credit scoring type people. Now, in the marketing space, now it is getting harder because yeah, we all get excited. Well, I do. We all get excited about marketing and engagement and keeping them and getting loyalty, and that's where the A, moving outside regulation, and B, in some cases becoming a bit creepy
Mm-hmm.
of putting something out there. So yeah, there's the again, lots of things that we put in place in that. There's privacy impact assessments when we're doing new things using new data. We are segregating data out. So we're going, this is personal data and it can only be accessed by these. This is sensitive and it's like really, really knocked down. And then others where we're deriving data. So you gave me the date of birth, I might derive an age range. It's like we're still going that is geodemographic data that we need to be careful about how we use. But when you're doing a brand new campaign, we're going, okay, are you using pre-existing attributes that are in a similar way? All good. If you're using a new attribute, new in a different way, we need to do, is this still in regulation? Could this be felt as creepy? And you apply both of those and you're probably going to get an ethical and responsible use of data.
You mentioned briefly there the idea of synthetic data, basically filling in gaps because you've got the information and using something like an LLM to do that. What then constitutes ownership of data when it's derived in that way, or it's transformed or aggregated from multiple sources?
It still belongs to the individual. So in most legal terms, if you're deriving an attribute from other attributes that individual has given you, you have to explain what you did. So so when they say, "Can you give me back my personal data and anything that you've done with it?" You have to give them the flow that you've done, the attributes that you've generated, and if it's a complex algorithm, make that algorithm put that back out in simple English. So again, regulation and self-regulation are both following those. So what I'm sitting here assuming is that everybody is doing the right thing and not hiding it away. But yeah, that ownership is still to the individual. We don't in Australia and New Zealand have this thing called right to be forgotten or right to erasure. It's probably going to come, but it's like that data is still my data. I've sort of lent it to you for use in appropriate things. But if I say I don't want you to use that anymore, A, I can block you in marketing. B, I can say, please delete anything to do with my personal data or anything that might be or anything that could be used to repersonalize me. So there's a whole thing in there in terms of appropriate regulation and processes that pretty much every organization I've worked in follows. Maybe that's because I don't get invited to the crap ones.
That's not a bad thing, though. It's a good thing to have a reputation like that. Do you think legislation should be principle-based, flexible in the way that it gets written and interpreted, or more rule-based, a lot stricter in the way that it handles changing data practices?
Look, I'll go back to English being an imperfect language. It's always going to be an imperfect language. The normally, so we can take the regulation and so brand new regulation, there's a lot of scare and fear in terms of industry because it's like, what do I need to do? How's this going to hurt my business, etc. What new technical or legal people do I need to hire in to fulfill this? Once it's settled in, so there are some hard regs that most people can do out of those, and you put those in. Then, if something turns out you've done something wrong, and you didn't do it on purpose, what tends to happen is the ombudsmans, etc., will come in and look and go, did you try? Did you even try? If you tried and it slipped through the gap, you're likely to get away. You might get a slap on the wrist, you might get a fine, but that's way, way better than, I'm sorry, you've just completely ignored every part of legislation and just plowed on regardless. Then that's massive fine, multi-million-dollar fines, quite appropriately. So I think this thing around the look at the legislation, work with it. English is a imprecise language, so there are always going to be what I thought I was saying when I was creating the law, what actually turned out with, and what people see when they read that piece. The secondary part in there, and we've seen it in Australia, and I suspect will be in New Zealand, as we're getting more. In government, younger. as in business, younger, more digital savvy, digital natives are coming up through. They have a much better understanding of what tech can do. We've got Carly Kine, the new privacy lady in Australia, and she's been in business and she's in government now, and she has got that thing of like, yeah, I know what the tech is doing to a good level, and I'm using that in line with what I'm telling businesses to do, or when I'm reviewing if somebody's done a bad thing. I know there was Victor Dominello, who's moved on to away from government now, but he was just so positive about positively using data and positively using technology to make things better for the populace. So I think with doing that, having people that are coming up through in government that understand more than digital than say my age upwards, they didn't live that, they didn't grow up with that, so we shouldn't expect them to have that depth of understanding and the foibles and the words that might mean different things. So bringing the younger-ish people up through and making them part of that legislation creation, force it a bit now, but also know that it's coming through anyway.
What becomes the risks then of over-legislating or under-legislating in an environment where data innovation is key to economic competitiveness?
Yeah, look, the cookie stuff. I'll go back to it. Cookies. The guy who invented cookies has apologized a lot of times because he put it together to go, no, this is going to help me do those things that we talked about. It's going to help me work out the journey that somebody takes through my website, work out where they go elsewhere, and do positive things in trying to understand more about them so that I can choose whether or not to promote my product to them. What we saw was industry just go, this is amazing. Yeah, I don't need to capture personal data anymore. I can just follow that cookie around and retarget them and retarget them and retarget them. And we're down to, less than a second now of me going onto a website, popping onto Facebook and it going, oh, you're looking for a burglar. Okay, for a 3. The legislation absolutely is required because, first in, best dressed style thing of somebody is always looking for that little niche, that little extra thing that they can do. So legislation, very definitely. It's hard to say. So over-regulation is I think it's not a good thing in the end, because you get the legislation. You go, here is the precise wording of these things, and it leaves nobody any wiggle room. But it also means if somebody goes, oh, well, look, I've completely one-way hashed this name, address, phone number, so now it's certainly not personal data, but I can take that and match it to somebody else's. That's not mentioned at all in this legislation that you put out last year. So I'm fine. Whereas if you've got something that says, you are not allowed without that individual's thing to share content on to share information that is tied to their record with you, with some other organization. You can, and that was bad wording, but you can get you be less precise and more get the general idea of what is allowed and what is not allowed. So yeah, the tighter regulation, over regulation, all it's going to do in a lot of cases is people are going to find ways around it.
How can regulators effectively monitor compliance then in a real-time data environment?
So there's a couple of pieces, as I said. The part before in when you're setting up the project that is doing a real-time score and taking in data, you will go through and go, is this an appropriate use of the data? Did I tell the individual when I captured that data that I was going to do this sort of thing with it? So that's your first project process before you go off and deploy. The secondary pieces are, when I said it a little bit, so ethical and responsible. There are some good pieces there coming into standard methods of deploying real-time stuff. So you're coming in first. with I understand the data attributes that I'm pulling into here, and I'm understanding where I'm doing them, and the algorithm I have created is putting my human face on. Is it ethical? Is what it's doing a responsible thing to do? And we're putting further checks in on there around that ethical and responsible side. And then, in the generative AI space, we're not in individual attributes. We're in things that are going around there. So there are again, lots more now on the generative AI, which is I'm running all this data through, and I've asked you to make a decision, do a score, from 0 to 1. We're now getting in the process in the stage where we can ask that AI to explain what it's doing. A little bit of that generative AI just out of its function, what it's doing, but return this to me in something that's explainable around all the minutiae and the neural net that you've created behind it in good English words, what it is that you're doing. So I can, again, put my human lens on it and go, yeah, okay, that feels appropriate. And if it doesn't, go, okay, sorry, I have to not allow you to use this attribute because, or further describe, actually, no, that's a bad thing to use that information because it could, align to this thing. So teaching and training the responsible and ethical parts within that AI as humans, effectively training that little 5, 10, 15-year-old about what ethics are, what impact some of these things might have on real humans.
So, last question for you. Everywhere in the world at the moment is doing the same kind of what we've got AI to deal with. Let's look at legislation. Let's change things up. Let's see what needs to be done. Do you think it is possible for Australasia, Australia and New Zealand to become world leaders in this? Or is it more likely that we're going to sit back and go, well, Europe's done this, America's done this, so we should follow suit?
So is that in legislation or is that in trying to do things with it?
In legislation.
Look,
so I think trying to do things with it would be fairly similar around the world.
Yeah. So in Australia, we've done the starter of, say, the EU AI Act, which is if you've got an algorithm, whether that's a generative AI one or an old style forest and trees analytics, that it needs to be explainable. So if I, as an individual, go in and say, what was this score? What did you do? What did you use of my data? That's, again, a good thing. And I think so the EU AI Act has done a little more, which is explain the algorithm to me, but also I have the right to ask an actual human to take that same data and make their informed decision on what that is. And I think that feels to me a reasonably good level of law, because and I don't feel it's overstretching. It's not overreaching. And as I say, in truth, many of us who were building these generative AI, bringing those analytics things, were also going, I sort of need the AI to explain what it's doing so I can feel comfort that it is coming out with the correct result. So I think this is a bit where we're hand in hand, the legislation and our own requirements of ensuring that it does what it says it does and no more and no less has come hand in hand. So yeah, look, I think Australia and New Zealand, yes, follow. My marketing friends will hate me, but I think putting a right to be forgotten in is almost a must now around the world, because I've shared my email, I've shared my address, I wanted to get a white paper or blah blah blah. There is zero reason that organization should be holding on to my personal data for the next 5, 10, 15 years. There was a short-term relationship there. I've downloaded your white paper. I'm giving you the I'm allowing you to hit me up for the next 3 months. If I don't come and buy your product or engage further with you, we should say that's the end of the deal. That's the end of our business relationship. If I've been buying your products for 15 years and then I stop, I should give you another couple of years, let's go 13 months to be able to do that. But I should also have the right to go, I don't want you to use my personal information anymore, and remove that from your systems. And it's a big, nasty, impactful thing for me, who's been working in data, to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But over the past 8 years, I've been designing all my systems to allow a right to be forgotten to go through without destroying all of my systems. So, but we should put that in, because it's as I said earlier, this is my data. I'm sharing it with you for something that I feel is going to be mutually beneficial. And once I'm saying I don't see me engaging with you anymore, moving more forwards, I should be able to go, you shouldn't have my data anymore on that basis. And I think, let's get that in next year.
Makes a lot of sense. James, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Learned lots. Gives me a whole arsenal to take with me down to the capital city and throw it at experts who know far more than I do about this topic.
Cool. Always a pleasure, Paul.
Hey, thanks for checking out this week's episode, and I want to thank James again for joining me for this conversation. I love the chats I have with James. He's so knowledgeable and so fun to talk to. And there's a lot of really thought-provoking elements that came through on this that I'll be taking with me when I head down to our capital city in a week or so. Until next time, make sure that you've liked, shared, subscribed to the video, look after yourself, be one with the force, live long, prosper, and I will catch you guys all on the next episode of the Data Radio Show.